Today I wanted to talk about my favorite book, and that's Atlas of the Heart from Brené Brown, one of my favorite authors. She introduces a lot of emotional understanding. So what I mean by that in this book especially, it's pretty much, I like to think of it like an encyclopedia to emotions. And that's what she says in here. It's the sort of subtitle, Mapping Meaningful Connections and the Language of Human Experiences. I think it's so important as coaches, as educators, as people to have an understanding of yourself and your emotions, especially from a time when at least my parents and the generation before me didn't really connect with their emotions because they didn't have the opportunity to. And it's not their fault, it's just the result of their environment and the wars and stuff they grew up through. So they didn't have access to that. Now we do. This is probably like step one to figuring out what the hell is going on up here and in here. I originally bought this book as an audiobook. I love audiobooks because I can read them when I go ride my motorbike. I can read them while I clean the house. I can read them while I play games. It's really efficient for me. Originally, I was like, this is a really cool book. It's got a lot of cool information, but it didn't really translate to me because it had Brené explaining sort of pictures and artwork she had in here. So it didn't really translate 100%. This is an incredible book. As you can tell, even just from the cover, there's been a lot of effort put into the artwork of it. Let's go through and take a look because it sort of breaks down into these wonderful little quoted pages, and you don't really need to highlight anything because what is important has already been highlighted. Let's take a look at this one. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect, live perfectly, work perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. That reaches out to me personally because I didn't know it at the time, but growing up, this really affected me, perfectionism. I didn't think it affected me because I was a chill dude, but I was so obsessed with how other people saw me and whether they thought I was good at stuff and whether I was looked cool. Everything was about what looked cool. If I was doing a sport, I had to look cool. And it was all about like, oh, I didn't have to put much effort into it. When in reality, I'd go home and like practice a sport before PE and make sure I was really good at it. So when I got there, it sort of just looked effortless when I played basketball. Or when I was playing rugby, I'd go home. I'd do all this sort of stuff to practice at home because I was scared of looking bad. I wanted to look really good at everything. So it's interesting to see that these days, when I'm peeling back the layers of all this trauma and insecurity, that really is the fact. I get really affected by shame, judgment, and blame, especially in my relationship with my beautiful wife. Like, I struggle with that when I don't look perfect, and it affects me. So it's interesting to read this, and I wonder what my experiences as a younger man and a young adult would be if I had access to this information. So that's why this book is so important. I think if I was to recommend any book to my younger self, it would be this one, simply to ready myself for the future. It's sort of like going to school and being taught about how important it is to save money or to put time into your health or sleep. This is the book that tells you to put time and effort into your mental side and emotions. It's really, really simple. It highlights a lot of interesting, valuable points that may hit you deep or they may sort of float along the top, but it's imperative, I think, in this day and age, as educators, to at least self-reflect and understand our own insecurities and what makes us great. Let me share a few more pages that I think are great. Here's one I really admire. The brokenhearted are the bravest among us. They dared to love. Oh, so good. And here's another one. Gratitude is an emotion that reflects our deep appreciation for what we value, what brings meaning to our lives, and what makes us feel connected to ourselves and others. Now, these sometimes feel obvious, but they also sometimes feel, when you have a thought and you don't really think about it that much, and then someone says it out loud and you're like, oh my God, you put words to one of my thoughts. Holy moly. And it feels really validating. This book is constantly doing that for me. I always feel validated when I read these things because it's sort of like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Now, let's take a look at how this book is broken down because I also really appreciate that. It's not just a list of emotions in alphabetical order of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's organized a little bit differently. After the introduction, it shows us places we go when ... Here's an example. Places we go when things are uncertain or too much. It's really important to me to learn about these things because we learn about really simple emotions in school, like, oh, that makes me happy, or that makes me sad, or that makes me angry. She does a really good job of defining the differences between very subtle and similar emotions like fear and dread. For example, she defines dread as something that lasts a long time. So the difference between these two main emotions is how long the emotion lasts for. Dread obviously lasting for a lot longer. Fear sometimes only lasts half a second to 2 seconds. And what I enjoy about this book is it puts words to my emotions because sometimes I have a lot of feeling and those feelings sometimes confuse me. What do I mean by this? I just did a personal development workshop with a guy called Ron, I'll put his name up somewhere, with QAS, Queensland Academy of Sport, and we went through 7 basic emotions, and we also talked about how easy it is for us to access those emotions. For example, joy. For me, joy is really easy for me to access. I'm a positive guy, but there's a positive and a negative to accessing it. When you over-access joy, sometimes it can be overwhelming to people and it can sort of restrict connection. You know, when someone has just lost a game and they really feel sadness, they feel loss. I'm over here being like, it's all right, we'll go to the next one. You know, it really limits me to connect with these people at their level. But at the same time, I also access anger really quickly. And that can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. A good thing of anger is you are motivated to make a change. And I feel like I make a lot of change because I'm frustrated with the system, especially with the system I'm at the moment. So talking about that and talking about how easy it is to access really put some words on the page for me and some thoughts up here. Something I really struggled with was fear. For all the other emotions, I was able to write down a physical reaction to them. You know, when I feel anxiety, I feel hollow. I feel my skin go up. I feel uncomfortable. I want to get away. When I feel joy, I feel warmth through my chest and it sort of goes down my arms. It's really interesting. These are just the physical reactions. But when I think of fear, I can't really think about the physical reaction. So that makes it really hard for me to access. And I think it's hard for me to access because I don't really understand the emotion that much. And that's what the benefit of this book is. It goes through each emotion and it's really quite interesting and educates me on this is how other people feel this emotion. And this is the effects of those emotions. And sometimes those emotions can be good and or bad. Let's look up fear. What the hell? Oh my God, I can't find it. Fear is a negative, short-lasting, high-alert emotion in response to a perceived threat. And, like anxiety, it can be measured as a state or trait. Incredible. It goes on to explain the difference between anxiety, fear, and dread. So this book doesn't only tell us more about ourselves, it sort of unravels the confusion we have about ourselves. I think sometimes we get told a lot about ourselves, like, oh, you're a very nervous person or you're a very angry person. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way to you, but then you sort of accept it. I think going through this book and reflecting on what these emotions mean to researchers and Brené Brown really made a difference on my own self-perception and my perception of others. Because it doesn't just do emotions, it also does how we cope with these emotions. It's really interesting. It has some beautiful graphics in it that make so much sense. I couldn't recommend it more to a person, but I also really recommend it to coaches and any educator, teacher, coach, specialist. It makes a massive difference when you know what's going on with yourself and you know what's going on with other people. I'm Coach Artie. I create I guess, content these days to make you a better person, inside and out. You get better when you practice. So you're going to practice knowing about your emotions. Go, Johnny!